All right, with that, ladies and gentlemen, we'll move into 408. And I wonder who that author is. It's Dave Steffen.
Again, thank you again, Chairman Mako and members of the committee for having public hearing on Senate Bill 408. When I was first elected in 2014 and came in here in 2015, one of the things that really stuck with me and throughout my time as a legislator and became something I picked up on and took wholeheartedly as well was when Governor Walker would say, for every person in Wisconsin who wants a job, let's find him a job. And that's something that I have taken to heart and have enjoyed being a part of for my 9 years now as being a state legislator. And as we are in exceedingly challenged workforce environments, it's important that we find additional ways to access workforce. And especially for those who are currently not counted in the unemployment number, those who are removed from the unemployment number and but are still interested in working. And one of those demographics are the visually impaired. So 70% of individuals with visual impairments are unemployed, not by choice. A big part of that has to do with their access to transportation. Unless you live in a highly urbanized environment, so some of our major cities, if you live outside of those highly urbanized environments with well-defined, robust public transportation, you do not have access affordably to get to and from work. And so I want to, along with my co-author, Senator Hutton, want to provide an opportunity to tap into a resource, a human resource that exists here in Wisconsin that wants to work, that wants to be more engaged in our communities, more connected to its neighbors, and more productive for themselves. And so this legislation creates a non-refundable tax credit for work-related transportation for the working blind. So individuals who are under IRS definition meet the definition of being visually impaired, legally blind, will have the opportunity to receive a non-refundable tax credit of $1,500, equaling 50% of their transportation costs. So it's a rather simple bill, but incredibly impactful. The cost of transportation is prohibitive for many in the disability community, especially the visually impaired, to make working possible. And so I look at this as an opportunity to provide a lot of varying benefits to this demographic, this group, and I'm hopeful to have your consideration. Beyond that, the fiscal impacts, just so you're aware and it's clear, is that it's roughly $1.3 million a year. This is a bipartisan bill, and there are no organizations that are registered against it. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Mr. Chairman and committee members, and be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Conley. Ms. Dietrich, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Representative Steffen. If anybody knows anything about me, I have been a long-time disability advocate, and I'm passionate about workforce. So this, is important legislation to me. Part of why I didn't jump on right away as a co-sponsor was I was hoping to hear in committee here some questions answered, and specifically, why isn't this bill for every disability? Because as you are aware, it's not just those with visual impairments that have transportation challenges. It's a number of disabilities. So could you speak to that
Absolutely.
for us a little bit?
Two very simple reasons. One is the definition and eligibility relating to being considered legally blind is very specific and very easily defined and identified by the medical community. Two, the fiscal. I have no idea what type of fiscal would be to add every disability. I know that based on a couple of other individuals who had asked about epilepsy being included, another one where it's a condition that strictly eliminates driving as a possibility. It went from 1.3 to roughly 6 million a year. I am willing to go as far as you are, financially, legislatively, to make this happen. Is that true for both chambers, both parties, and the governor? I don't know that. So I looked at this as, I know the amount, I know the people. Can I get this across the goal line? Can I get this one on the board, and then maybe look at it in the future? I want this to be, if nothing else, an opportunity to show this body, this building, that if you give individuals who want to work this type of opportunity, you will get the money back in spades. You will get the connection to community back in spades. And so I was looking at it almost as a pilot-ish type program, even though it's permanent. So it's a long way of saying I'm with you. If you can help me get the people I need on board in the State Assembly and Senate, I'd be there with you.
If I could follow up, Mr.
Yes,
Chair.
go ahead.
I guess that's the big challenge for me, is like, how do I say, okay, we're going to go ahead and do this for our visually impaired community, which are extremely important. And since the day I was sworn in, I'm like, why don't we have more people in our disability community with unemployment as low as it is in this state? Why aren't our employers going, oh, this is perfect. These people would be perfect in our work setting. And I think the fear factor gets a little too crazy, but you know, the people who aren't working that you're advocating for with this legislation are definitely an asset to the working community. My big challenge is like, okay, how do I go back and say, okay, I'm going to do this for you, my friends who are visually impaired, but who, those of you who are, you know, have CP or autism or can't drive for other reasons, I'm not going to do it for you. That's my big conundrum with,
I can solve
with this
that for you.
Legislation. I
can solve that for you, because in 2 weeks you're going to introduce a bill for everything identical to this, and I'm going to co-sponsor it. Okay? Deal? You do that. I'll help you find a Senate lead.
I don't think you're tracking here, Representative.
I am tracking. You're saying.
But thanks for
all right.
for your thoughts.
That's a great.
You see her back away.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. I think we all understand that. I came in the same time you did. 9 years we've been in together.
Yes.
And it's the art of the compromise. It's progress, not necessarily perfection. And you're making a great point. We'd love to. There's a lot of that stuff, but we move in the right direction, and I think this is a great step in that right direction. Can you explain to me a little bit, Representative Stephan? So, what constitutes transportation? So, are these folks then needing to call an Uber? Do they need? Tell me what actually happens.
Yeah. So, great question. So, what does that entail? It's the cost, transportation costs from home to work back to home. And so as someone who's visually impaired, that would mean they're not driving themselves. So what would be the alternatives? That could be public transportation. It could be Uber, and you'll probably notice that I think today Uber actually registered in favor of this bill because they want to actually work with Wisconsin to develop a response through their platform to this legislation if this became law. It could also be a personal drive service. So it would be any type of receipt that you can produce at tax time that you can then use to offset some of your income.
So that's, I guess, my question.
Yeah.
So it can't be your daughter drives you there and says you owe me $20.
Yeah, that's a good question. If it should have to be it has to be, and I'd be open to that amendment, that it has to be let's say
Well, there has to be a receipt, is what you're trying to say.
Just like any
if
other.
If the daughter had a legitimate transportation business, is that what you're thinking? Yeah. Okay. Got it. Okay, Mr. Armstrong.
It's called incrementalism. Get this passed first so we can keep adding on to it. So I'm on the same page as you. This is consistent with what I do every day in the other job. I'm on the Regional Disabilities Board with the whole idea of trying to get more folks with disabilities working. That's why I supported this. As soon as I saw it, I got onto it immediately. And yes, I do intend to follow it up with others. So I need to improve it.
Thank you. So it sounds like you already have at least two co-sponsors, Representative Armstrong, for your more broader
Dietrich.
bill.
There you go. That's right.
So this is getting, and trust me, and I am sincere in that, Representative. I don't mean to make light of that. It is really trying to get something done versus nothing, and because I have a close affinity with this organization, this demographic, and Beyond Vision, who's going to be speaking here, I felt like this is a bite of the apple I could handle. And I know these people. I know the visually impaired. And more than anything, they would love to be off of entitlements. And if the cost of transportation is blocking that, and we can do it in a non-refundable tax credit way, meaning they don't get the money until they've actually sent it to the government first, I think it's a good step. Thank you.
Rick, Mr. Balde.
Thank you. So, also the bill says the tax credit will cover up to 50% of the transportation cost, up to $1,500. So, what does that mean in actual reality? So, if my tax expenses were $1,000, are you only going to cover this bill? Is going to cover only $500 of that?
So, what it means is that you would have to incur $3,000 worth of transportation costs as a visually impaired person to get the maximum benefit.
Okay.
And does that make sense?
But to his question, then,
No.
is that right? You incur 1,000, you get 500.
So the maximum is 1,500, right? That's what it states.
Right. That is, so you would have to have a tax liability after you go through your, you're doing your 1040, doing your taxes, and it's going to give you a number at the end as to what your tax liability is. And if it is $1,501 or $1,500 or less, you will pay zero in state taxes.
Okay.
We'll go to Mr. Gross and have him help clarify that
Yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah, I thought Rep. Stefan did a good job of explaining this is, the calculation of the credit is going to be dependent both on what you spend annually on your transportation expenses, and because it's a non-refundable credit, it's going to depend on the total tax liability you're generating to the state in terms of your income. So you're going to need, I'm just glancing at the tax rates and brackets for 2022, but you're going to need an income to fully offset. If you spent $3,000 to get a $1,500 total non-refundable credit, you'd need income into the, mid tens of thousands of dollars range in order to offset that against your state tax liability.
Okay, so this one may not be very related to the actual bill, but I think it's important that I ask you. it indicated that about 70% of Wisconsinites who are legally blind are unemployed.
Yes.
So the fact that you look into this issue, how transportation is a big burden on this community, what other factors you think outside of being blind is responsible for this high unemployment rate?
Well, that's really a good question that I think, so Beyond Vision, that's going to be speaking next. They deal with employment of the visually impaired directly every single day. I'm afraid to say what I think it is versus what they know it is. So if it's acceptable, Representative, I would prefer to have the experts in this, who is Beyond Vision. Again, they work with the visually impaired in an employment relationship every single day. And I'd rather them kind of lay those out as it relates to percents, reasons, if that's okay, sir.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very good, Mr. Steffen. Thank you very much. With
Thank
that,
you.
I think we will go to those folks. So
Thank you.
if we can call Mr. Heeson, Ms. Wemble, and Mr. Young, please.
My name is Steve Heeson. I'll start. And with me is Jennifer Wenzel, HR Generalist, Beyond Vision, and also Jeff Young from Industries for the Blind and Visually Impaired, or IBVI. Both companies are in West Dallas, not too far from one another. I work remotely for Beyond Vision. I live in Janesville, and all I can do is speak from the heart, talk about me and my family and friends and loved ones and what this bill would mean to us. I'm just a regular working guy. I'm married for 17 years, have 5 kids. Yeah, 5 kids, which is expensive. Very expensive. Matthew and Josiah are both blind. It's a genetic eye disease that we have. Matthew is 11, and let's see, Matthew is 11, and Josiah is 16. Matthew loves to play the piano. He's outstanding. He's a regular kid. He loves technology, and he drives me nuts with it. He's communicating with his friends all the time. He is going to be a high-end future employee, hopefully in this state, after he gets his master's degree or doctorate or whatever. Whatever he wants to do, he's going to do, and this is my point. Josiah, 16, he loves girls, technology, the Beatles, and he plays the alto sax. And he'll be going to college not too long from now. And we love the Janesville community.
In that order, Steve?
Yeah.
Okay.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Got to get those other kids going, too. We love the city of Janesville. I just want to say hi to Sue Conley, who's my representative, District 44. Woohoo! All right.
Great to see you.
Thank you. Good to be here. But I'm just a regular God-fearing church member, family guy, dedicated employee. I was working in sales for IBVI, and then I moved over to Beyond Vision. Beyond Vision's given me the opportunity to advocate, like IBVI did as well. It's also given me the opportunity to work from home and live in a beautiful community like Janesville. One short story, I took Matthew to his piano lesson because my wife was doing other things, soccer, volleyball, running kids to different places. And Napton Music is about 4.5 miles from our house, and Matthew and I took the bus. And guess how long that took? 55 minutes to go 4.5 miles. How many of you take public transportation because you have to? How many of you remember the last time you took the city bus? Just as an example, there's 31% of Wisconsinites are non-drivers, And I would say 26%, I'm just throwing that number out there. I did a little Googling, but 26% probably choose to be non-drivers. Us three up here are among the percentage that have no choice. And we take public transportation if we need to, but it's not always the best option. And there is Uber and Lyft. I took Lyft from where Van Gelder let me off today. Had a great driver named Monica. She did a great job. I tipped her well. That costs money. And there's costs that come up. This is an employment cost as well. Like Mr. Steffen said, I want to thank Mr. Steffen and also Senator Hutton for authoring and co-authoring this important bill. It's very important that we incrementally get this started somewhere. This is a great starting point to get this started. And I'm glad we're going that direction. But I just want to say that if this wasn't an employment issue, I probably wouldn't be up here speaking, but employment helps the employee, it helps the employer, it helps the direct dependence of the employee, and it leads to good things for everybody involved, and I think this will pay back in spades. And hopefully when Ms. Dietrich authors that other bill, which is exciting, that will pay back in spades as well. But we need to get started with this. I spoke before the Budget Committee. It took me 6 hours for my name to get called. And so this is something that's really important to me, and I hope that you all not just consider jumping on board, but making sure we get this bill passed as soon as possible. And I won't take any more thunder because I went first because I knew they would take all my points away because these are very bright individual people. So I'll let Jennifer go first if you want, or next if you want to.
Sure. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Jennifer Wenzel. I am the HR generalist at Beyond Vision. Thank you so much, Representative Mako, and to the committee for listening to me today. I am not a habitual testifier, so I hope I do okay. I wanted to talk a little bit about me personally, and then I can also address, I think it was Representative Baldick that was asking about barriers to employment. I can address some of that because I've done both recruiting and general HR for Beyond Vision. So I deal a lot with our blind employees and with, I'm also the chairperson for the Employment Committee for the National Federation of the Blind, and so we deal a lot with blind employment. It's becoming more and more a passion of mine. I grew up in Wisconsin, and I've lived in Janesville and Portage, and then I moved away to Maryland and Minnesota, and now I'm back, I'm happy to say, in Wauwatosa. So very glad to be back in Wisconsin. It's part of my heart. But I grew up in Watertown, and I would definitely not live there, not because of the main reason I would not want to live in Watertown is poor transportation. Transportation has always been something that has shaped where I've lived. One of the first things, we bought several homes, and we're always looking. I mean, even with, we have 3 sons, and we've always looked at schools and things like that, but we always have to look at how close are we to public transit? How will my husband be able to get to work? Will I be able to get to work if I'm looking for employment? It's so much a part of our lives that we have a son, our oldest son is becoming a pilot, and I think it's very much stems from the fact that when he was younger, he spent a lot of time on buses pretending to drive the bus with the bus driver, and we also spent time on trains for vacations, and he loved that, and now he flies, and he's a driver, so. But my younger 2 sons have chosen not to drive. We've always lived in larger cities and used public transit, and they love to bike, and so they feel that biking right now and public transit and Uber and Lyft works for them. Now, they may drive at some point, but it shocks their cousins who live in more rural areas that they don't drive, but they just feel like there's other alternative transportation. And I'm glad they know that, but I'm glad they have options. I obviously am not going to be a driver, and that's probably a really good idea since I cannot see at all. But I am employed. I got some residential blindness training to learn a lot of cane travel skills and public, working how to gain access to a new bus system and learn about new bus systems. And that training has given me a lot of confidence to learn about public transit anywhere I've lived. But transportation has always been a challenge, especially with young kids, trying to get them to activities, to school. That doesn't necessarily touch on this bill, but for employment, turned down a job I really wanted in Maryland because I knew I would not be able to get there reliably and get home reliably and still take care of my family. I didn't even interview for another job I kind of wanted for the same reason. Here in Wauwatosa, I happen to live where I can take a bus, and it takes me about 20 minutes to get to work, which is beautiful. But it's not perfect. The cold, the snow, the lovely Wisconsin winters. I've definitely taken some Uber and Lyft. And I'm a person that tends to work late. I like to get my to-do list done. And so if it gets to be 6 o'clock at night, I don't necessarily want to jump on the bus as it's getting darker and darker and walk down Burleigh to get home. So then I'll grab an Uber or Lyft. And it does add up. It becomes part of the budget. Instead of my Starbucks run, I do an Uber or Lyft, And sometimes one of the barriers of transportation is convincing newly blind people that, number one, they can leave their house and get to a workplace and contribute to work again. Becoming blind later in life can be very isolating, and it can really demean it can take away their confidence. And really convincing people that, yes, you can do this transportation, and then there is the expense of it, and convincing people that there is a way that we might be able to offset some of that expense could really help significantly to lower that barrier for employment. It is, of course, not the only reason that 70% of blind people nationwide are unemployed, but transportation is a big factor. There are a lot of people that are not trained on how to get from place to place with using a cane or a dog, and there's a significant shortage of people to teach them at this point. And there are a lot of people that want to work but are just not sure if the transportation costs that they'll incur are worth it, so this would help. I think some of the other barriers to employment, well, I know some of them are fear from the employer of what the blind person might be able to do or contribute. There's some fears of blind people maybe being unsafe in the workplace, which is absolutely untrue. We as a company have a very, very good safety record, and we have a ton of blind employees. And other places I've known people to work, there's not a significant safety factor, but there is that fear factor. And then, of course, there are technology barriers, but some of the barriers come from blind people themselves not being sure of what they can do and what they can contribute, and just getting that chance to get in the door. And getting that chance to get in the door is something that if people know they have the transportation, they might push harder for. I can get here, I can reliably get to work every day because they know that they'll have this tax credit at the end to help. So I think that it really would be significant and an impact for people's employment. Employment is something people want. People don't just want to be home. They don't want to be depressed. They don't want to be isolated. They want to be out in the working world and have so much to offer. Younger blind people, even blind people that are heading toward the senior realm, have a lot to offer in the workplace. And so I really urge you to consider this as a start. Yes, I would love to see this work for every disability too, but I would love to see this step, and I guess I'm biased because this is my disability, but I would love to see this someday be for everyone, but this is a start, and I would rather see us step and start than do nothing. So thank you so much, and I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Thank you. Mr. Young, please.
Hello, I'm Jeff Young. I am a human resources representative with Industries for the Blind and Visually Impaired. We usually call ourselves IBVI. Like Beyond Vision, we are based in West Dallas. We've been there for quite a few years, and we also have satellite facilities in Menominee Falls and Janesville. I could tell similar stories to Jennifer and Steve, but rather than sound like a broken record, I want to shed another aspect to this that people may not consider. It was mentioned that, in some of these larger urban areas, people have more transportation options. They can take the bus, they can take paratransit, and that is absolutely true. The issue is, for some, is that if they want to come and work for a company that is across county lines from where they reside, the county line, as far as public transportation is concerned, often might as well be a proverbial brick wall, because most counties' public transit systems are specific to those counties. For example, if somebody applies for a job, and I handle a lot of recruiting for my company, if somebody applies for a job with us, they live in Waukesha, we're in West Dallas, they have a very difficult time getting to us, even though they're only 3, 4, 5 miles away. And what this bill, this tax credit would help with is, while they might not be able to take a bus to us, they could take an Uber or a Lyft or some form of taxi or some sort of transit service. And while it doesn't eliminate that brick wall that is caused by different counties having their own systems, it does open a door, and it does allow more people to get to work. An example, recently we had a candidate who has recently started working for us, gets a combination of rides from family and Ubers, because that person does live in Waukesha and doesn't have the option of using public transportation. So one thing this bill can help is it may help those who live maybe in areas that don't have as strong a transit to be able to get to an area that has more employment opportunities, and serve as a little bit of abatement to that significant cost that person might not otherwise be able to overcome. Blind people, visually impaired people, disabled people in the community, generally speaking, are a little bit unique because most people complain about paying taxes. We actually want to be working and paying taxes because we want to be productive and participating members of society and not using as much or of any of Social Security or other forms of welfare if we can help it. And while yes, we would be getting a tax credit, I would argue that the value we bring to the community outweighs any cost that the 1.3 million mentioned in this bill per year would be giving out. This kind of bill is pretty easily auditable if there were ever suspicions of somebody taking advantage. Not only that, but it is a bill that I think can really open doors for other bills to come, as Representative Dietrich voiced her concern, and I totally agree. But I think this is kind of a opening that door, starting that movement of getting things going in the right direction, not only having more tax-paying citizens, productive citizens, but also bringing more people with value to the workforce. I'm sure you've seen in the news how difficult it is for companies to find good employees. There are a lot of good employees out there that really want to work, and this kind of bill would really go a long way to helping them. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Wonderful testimony. And I want to we're going to take some questions here, but you're absolutely right, Mr. Young. I think many of us in this room know a young gentleman by the name of David Pino, and I have his permission to tell this story. But he advocates for disability rights and other things, and he himself has some of those issues that he deals with on a daily basis. And one day he's in my office on April 15th, and he said exactly what you said, Mr. Young. He goes, "It's April 15th. I love April 15th. I go, "David, are you nuts? Nobody likes April 15th. He goes, I go, "Why do you like April 15th, David?" He goes, "Because I get to file a tax return like everybody else." And I was shocked. And I thought to myself, that's it right there. Fantastic. And that's what he does. And I would also tell you, this is literally almost 45 years ago. I mean, this is before Microsoft was a company. And you couldn't just go buy box software. Our programmer that started our company, that helped us build the software and the company that we have today, was blind. He was Bob Taylor. He was a blind computer programmer. And he wrote all the software that drove our company for the first 10 years until he retired and until Microsoft kicked in. So I want to thank you guys for all coming here today. We have a couple of questions. Ms. Go ahead. It's your constituent. Go for it.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't really have any questions. I did a stint for Can Do in Janesville, which is providing employment for folks with disabilities. So this is important to me as well, and look forward to more iterations perhaps going forward. But I did just want to say thank you very much, all three of you, for coming and sharing your story with us today. I do think it's impactful for us to hear from folks who are directly impacted by legislation that we consider, and you did a great job with no notes in front of you. Like I have, right?
Thank you for serving in the committee.
Yes,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kelly. Mr. Brooks?
So a couple questions for you. First, a comment. I appreciate Representative Stefan bringing the bill forward and understanding that this is a start and you can never finish the race if you don't start. But as I look at the bill, and one of the reasons I didn't sign on is I had a lot of questions as far as, is this going to really help meet the need? Because I look up transportation costs, and a bus pass in Madison is $65 a month, which is very cheap. But I look at other studies and I see the average commuter cost is $8,466. So there's a huge disparity, and a couple of you pointed that out, between if you have mass transit in your community versus you don't. Do you think, and maybe I can talk to Representative Stefan afterwards, that the $3,000 is adequate? Is that a big enough number to really get us over the hump? Can you, I guess, tell me what your average monthly spend is on transportation for any one of you, or some of your clients in more rural areas?
Incrementally, and we know that the Assembly and the Senate is pretty conservative right now. And incrementally, I think this is a good place to start. And no, it's not nearly enough to start putting a dent in the cost of transportation related to employment for blind or otherwise.
What do you think you spend on transportation a month? Any one of you, or your, or through your associations, what the average cost is? Do you know?
Probably, I don't even know, probably 400 a month, 500 a month-ish. But that's because I'm in a city and I do a lot of bus, so I can, if I'm taking the bus every day, it's like $4 a day. But if I'm taking Uber and Lyft, it's probably average of $15 each way. So that'd be 30. So I often take a Lyft home, so I probably spend at least 3 times a week, I'm spending $15 to get home. It's not enough, but it is a start. I think, especially to Jeff's point about the county lines, that affects all of our employees too. We also have a location at Fort McCoy, and we've got people who are trying to get to the base there, and that's, there's not really public transit in that area, and so that's a consideration too. So the less public transit options, and you're relying more on taxis, Ubers, and Lyfts, you're going to spend more. So it's not going to be. It's not going to solve the issue, but it at least is a start, and it's an incentive to help. It's something that will help.
Good. If you could, in your spare time, if you could provide Representative Stefan or our office with those average costs, because it might help to justify an amendment to increase the dollar amount, or come back next session and do that. And then the second question I have is probably for Ledge Council. We had talked about it when the representative was up, that you have to be a qualifying transportation service, but I'm also thinking of a vast majority of the state that Uber and Lyft or a shared taxi, right? A lot of counties have limited services, so they couldn't use a relative or a caregiver to provide that transportation in this bill. It would have to be a shared ride taxi, an Uber or Lyft. But they could become an Uber or Lyft driver, and then it would be qualified? Is that so if I wanted to take my blind sister to the doctor, I couldn't do it, but if I became an Uber or a Lyft driver, then I would qualify. It would be just that simple.
That, I think, is a potential option. The bill defines the qualified transportation services as mass transit, paratransit, taxi cab, or service provided by a transportation network company, which pulls in Uber and Lyft. And as I think that I would say that a caregiver would need to start a business, but as you point out, and it could be as simple as running that through Uber.
Giving an Uber or Lyft driver.
I can't speak to Uber's requirements as to whether you'd get bumped off there as a driver if you only were available when you were serving one person. I can't speak to that, but the idea that a caregiver could start a business and go through those more formal channels, that's recognized, that would be recognized under the bill, while as currently drafted, it doesn't speak to like direct, familial
But in order
service.
to be a qualified reimbursable expense for the client, it would have to go through one of those kinds of
Correct.
companies. Okay. All right, thank you. Those are my two questions.
Mr. Schneider, please.
Thanks for the testimony. My constituents, we are up north, Wausau area, and that neck of the woods. And you folks are here in the southern and southeastern part of the state. Is there as great a need up in the north woods, especially with Uber and Lyft barren deserts up there, and even in some locations, taxis? Is there a need for that up there, and what's kind of the alternatives?
Well, a lot of blind and vision impaired people up north choose to relocate to Eau Claire, Wausau, Green Bay, places like that, across. Because employment itself is very limited for the employer's understanding of the capabilities of a blind and vision impaired person and the jobs themselves. But if I lived in Toma or Sparta or someplace like that, I would probably look at becoming more entrepreneurial than employee related. But yes, there is definitely a need to expand that in all areas, even though it might look differently than it would in Milwaukee and Madison. If that makes any sense.
Very good. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for taking time out of your day to come up and testify in person. We appreciate that. With that, we have several folks registered in favor. Dennis Jess from Wisconsin Council of the Blind. Matt Walsh, Wisconsin Economic Development Association, and Senator Putnam, the Senate District, all in favor. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we have our next scheduled meeting on the 26th, which will most likely again be a public and an exec. And Mr. Rasmussen will get that information out when we get a little more focused. So with that, we will be adjourned.
You have been watching a production of Wisconsin Eye, your unfiltered window into legislative deliberations and public policy programming, where our mission is to provide Wisconsinites an opportunity to access the legislative process and connect with conversations that inform our citizenry. Please consider supporting our mission, and thank you for watching. Wisconsin Eye, policy made public.